Steve Abramson, Abramson. I'm an interviewer for the interviews. I've done about 75 to 80 in the last 20 years. It was sitting with my dad in the 50s while he was laughing hysterically at Jack Benny, Red Buttons, Sid Caesar, all of that. I just remember how that affected him, and that was the beginning of my love of television, just the honeymooners, watching him and how much pleasure he got from watching TV. It was about the third season of The Twilight Zone, something I was not aware of. It was airing on Friday nights at something like 10 o'clock, and I was home alone. I was about, I don't know, maybe 11 years old or so, 12. And I heard this theme music, you know, ding, 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 ding. And I went, what the hell's this? And so I didn't say hell back then. Anyway, so I watched this episode. It was about the girl who was wrapped in bandages, and you couldn't see her, you couldn't see the doctors, and the twist, of course, was that she was beautiful by our standards, and the doctors and nurses were all deformed. And I went, what did I just see? And that was my hook. And so I started watching obsessively, and like in my high school years, Rod Serling was my idol as a writer. I wanted to be a TV writer. That's when it hit me that I want to do what he does with that kind of imagination. So it was definitely The Twilight Zone that made me think about what I would want to do as a grown-up.
So it was that episode and that show and Rod Serling all at once. You're like, that's what I want to do right there.
Yeah, in fact, I sort of pursued that when I was a senior in high school. I took a creative writing course, and it was about 20 people. And the teacher and I sort of, we sort of huddled together, and he'd give an assignment to the other 19 students, and we actually wrote a script for a show at the time called The Invaders, which is sort of like The Fugitive, but about a guy who was trying to convince government officials that there were these invaders. And so that was the first time I actually took a shot at writing a script. Didn't go much further than that. When I went to college, there was a playwriting student I gave it to read, and he lost it. So I wasn't thinking about making copies. But yeah, so I was actively thinking about writing for TV. Now I ended up directing mostly, but writing and Rod Serling were the two things that ignited that, that desire to work in television. I've worked in television for decades, okay? I was paid to do that. I loved it. I don't regret it. I mostly did reality news, not the scripted that I wanted to do. Doesn't matter. Not many people have the privilege to do that. But I can tell you exactly how I felt about the archive, now called The Interviews. I feel like that's the most important thing I've ever done, and it's a volunteer job. And I've tried to teach my children, payment isn't always in money, it's what you get out of the experience of something. So for me, to stand, I'll just step back a second, this far away from someone, interviewing them for like 3 hours, that's priceless, as they say. So that's how I look at it. I look at if there's a legacy that I've helped to, not my legacy, but just to participate in, it's to facilitate having these people who are in every area of television tell their story. And we start at the beginning of what was your name at birth? It's the first question. And the last one, unless they're not older, is how would you like to be remembered? Otherwise we say, where do you see yourselves in 10 years? But no, it's like a comprehensive life story focusing on television, and it's been a privilege. And they can call me, it doesn't matter who the subject is, Karen Herman, who was running at the time, doesn't matter who it is, they don't have to be famous or anything. I always said yes, because I've always believed, and it's true, I believe everyone has a story, and they're fascinating stories. So yeah, so this job, if you want to call it that, has paid me in riches that you can't add up on a adding machine, So that's for me, that's the impact of this whole project. I've been asked a lot about who's your favorite interview? And I swear almost every single time I give a different name, because so many of them were so great and meant so much to me. But top of my head, Patty Duke. We went to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in the middle of winter to do her interview in a hotel room. She died a couple of years later. She was 69. It was one of the best interviews I was able to be part of because she did not hold back. Totally honest. Had a lot of issues in her life. Patty Duke. David Milch, who did Deadwood and NYPD Blue, and just so many shows, was a great academic, came from academics. It was just so raw and so honest. One of my favorites from NYPD Blue was Dennis Franz, who he won like 5 Emmys in a row, I think, for playing Sipowicz on NYPD Blue. People started saying, well, he's not that great an actor, he's just doing the same thing. If you met the guy, he's the nicest guy in the world. He is the total opposite of Sipowicz. That's acting. You know, you make him believe that. I mean, the creator of CSI, I did. God, so many. Oh, one of my favorite was Adam West, who played Batman in the 60s. He was funny as hell. And I mean, I always introduce him on camera like a video slate. My name is, this is so-and-so, we're doing this, or whatever, what date it is, all that. And I said, I think the first question was like, so what was your name at birth? And he kind of looked and went, who wants to know? Or something like that. It was just a funny kind of a comeback. And I went, this guy, yeah. So it was a kind of delightful experience. And if you see the interview, I think people who are fans of his would be happy with it because he was, at that point, he was way past being worried about being typecast, you know.
He was a cop like 45 times in TV. He was a cop at everything.
Right. So, yeah, at that point, he was ready for it. Dick Donner, Richard Donner, who directed a lot of TV, and then he went on to the first big Superman movie that was popular, and he's done tons of other movies became a movie director. But one of the iconic episodes he directed as a TV director was Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. That's with that little monster on the wing. So I'm talking to him about that episode, and he said, you know, I don't remember all the details of that. I do remember we shot it in 3 days. It was a pain in the ass. We had to get a gimbal to do this stuff. The costume on the small little person was terrible, but yet Shatner put in such a great performance. It really drove the whole story. But I mean, this is things I'm excited about even talking about it. This is what I got out of it. Is that's a small amount of kind of the experiences I had as an interviewer, being able to not just look at the page and just read questions, but always engage and look at the person and just kind of take quick glances, and be prepared for the interview to go off script, which means just listen. Important to listen, because they may say something and I'll go, oh wow, well, that's really cool, and kind of go down that road. But we had kind of a time limit, so I had to kind of get it back, and Karen Herman was leaning over my shoulder, you know, give me little post-it notes that I just put down and looked at real quickly. I had to apply to this just like applying for a job, even though it's really a volunteer job. And I've done tons of TV shows where I've had to interview both celebrities and what I call civilians, just regular people. And I worked for Dr. Phil for like 18 seasons, and a lot of the civilians, I call them, I'd get there and they'd be freaked out and then go, well, no one cares what I think, or no one cares about what I'm going through. And I would always say, everyone has a story. Everyone has a story, and you have a story. So my job is I'm not here to direct you and tell you what to do. It's like, my job is to help you tell your story. And that's how I feel about all these people who work in TV. They all have fascinating stories. And before this archive was a thing 25 years ago, a lot of these people were lost because they died. And I believe that this whole project was inspired by Steven Spielberg's project to interview Holocaust survivors before they passed on. And they said, we need to do that with television people too. And that's kind of the beginnings of it, I think.